Good to see you. Thank you. I've got a... Can you guys hear me? Is the mic on? Excellent. It's super. I was telling the fellow in the front here, it's super hard to do a presentation. He's sitting here eating a Three Musketeer bar. It's like my favorite candy. I don't know where he got it from, but if any of you have an extra one you're not eating, I'll see you at the end of the session. So, Joe, it's great to be here. We're super happy to be here at the inaugural Flow event. So huge congratulations to Roost, and thank you so much for having us. Great to see you all here. My name is Joseph Landes. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and one of the two founders of Nerdio. Our mission at Nerdio is to empower MSPs like you to build successful cloud practices using the Microsoft Cloud. I had the opportunity to work for Microsoft for 23 years, and I worked for all three CEOs, for Bill, for Steve, and for Satya. And I was actually living in India for about 3.5 years when Satya became the CEO. So he came to visit India for his first time as an Indian-born CEO of Microsoft. It was a little bit like the President of the United States coming to India. And he sent me an email a few months before the visit. He said, Joseph, I'd like to do an event with students. I said, great, let's get students together. We got about 1,500 students into a huge auditorium, and Satya spoke about technology. And he had this phrase that has stuck with me until this day. Our industry does not respect tradition, it only respects innovation. I think that is so important for a conference like this that you're all participating in. It's so important for us as vendors. It's very easy to get stuck in the way of doing things in the past, right? The inertia pulls us back to what we've always done. But I think one of the reasons you're here at an automation conference like this and learning with all of us is because you don't want to be stuck in the past. You want to move forward. You want to bring the latest innovation that you possibly can to your customers. And I think that's what's great about these events, and that's why it's great to see you all here. When we started Nerdio almost now 6 years ago, which is a little bit hard to believe, Joe is one of the first people I reached out to when we started Nerdio. We said, how are we going to be successful at Nerdio? What are the things that we need to do to achieve success at Nerdio, regardless of what we are building? We said, well, if we can help an MSP grow their business, if we can help an MSP make more money, those are great things. But more than that, even, if we can help you get smarter on a particular topic, that was really the North Star for Nerdio. We said, you know, if we can lead with knowledge and follow with selling, we think we'll be a successful company. And the area that we decided to focus on when we started is helping you get smarter on the topic of Microsoft Azure, which then evolved into a broader topic of the Microsoft Cloud. And we believe that every MSP should be building a cloud practice with Microsoft Azure as its foundation. But as we always say, it's easier said than done. If it was as easy as I just said, everyone would be doing it. What are some of the challenges that MSPs face when they think about building a cloud practice with Azure as the foundation? There's certainly the inertia piece that I just mentioned a moment ago, that you're kind of used to doing things a certain way. Maybe you're used to buying on-prem servers and you're afraid of moving to the cloud. The market is moving very, very quickly, and Microsoft doesn't really give you a map or guideposts for how to actually build a cloud practice using their technology. And as a result, what ends up happening is that MSPs, they become overwhelmed with the Microsoft stack. You know, I think every MSP knows Microsoft 365. That's sort of become a bread and butter thing. There's almost nobody not using Microsoft 365. The only question now is, are you going to start using Copilot? But very few MSPs really deeply understand Microsoft Azure. And when you talk to MSPs, and we've talked to tens of thousands of MSPs over the past 6 years, they say Azure is just an overwhelming topic. And I'm also worried about how am I going to make money when it comes to Microsoft Azure. You know, we've heard almost every excuse that an MSP can make around why they're not moving to Microsoft Azure. You know, an MSP will say, well, Azure is too expensive. I don't know how I'm going to make money with Azure. There's this kind of runaway train that's happening with consumption, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to catch that train. So our goal at Nerdio was really to do two things. It's to build a product, it's to build a platform that makes things as easy as possible for you. We will always err on the side of ease. We have a phrase that we use at Nerdio, it's called three-click management. If you can't do a task in Azure or a task in Intune or a task in any product that we're supporting, in 3 clicks or less, we're probably doing something wrong and we need to rethink our processes. And we want to help you make a lot more money in the cloud. We don't want it to be where you approach the cloud and you say, you know, I can't make as much money. We want to flip the equation and help you make even more money. So the product that we have, it's called Nerdio Manager for MSP. I see people out in the audience, although I'm a little bit blinded by the light. I think that was a song some years ago, right? Blinded by the light, right? Anyways, dating myself. So when we started the company, we were very focused on that top left-hand box, the infrastructure side, right? Helping you achieve success with Microsoft Azure. And we were also focused on the identity side, what's now called Entra ID. Over time, MSPs came to us and they said, you know, this Microsoft Intune thing that I get for free as part of Microsoft 365 Business Premium is actually just as complicated as Microsoft Azure. Can you help us with that? And we've evolved over the past 2 years to also supporting Intune. And then MSPs came to us and said, you know, I buy Microsoft 365 and I get all these security products called Defender, but I don't really know exactly how to use Defender. Can you help us with that? So we recently launched Defender for Endpoint to help MSPs with security. And the way we think about Nerdio Manager for MSP is across 2 dimensions. Multi-tenant, so that you can manage all of your clients in one single pane of glass, and also cross-tenant, so you could set a policy for one client in one tenant and essentially copy that policy over to all your tenants so you don't have to create a bespoke environment each time you set up a client. So that's our product. But I like to always in these presentations kind of go back to our heritage, I guess, which is Microsoft Azure, because at the end of the day, if we can't help you with Microsoft Azure, we're probably doing something wrong. There are 4 primary areas that we add value in when it comes to Microsoft Azure. And I want to go through those for a few minutes because I think it's important. The first is we help you automate the deployment of Microsoft Azure. This is an automation conference. We're an automation company. You know, a lot of times MSPs come to us and they say, you know, I can't even get started. I have my Azure subscription, and if I want to build out a client in Microsoft Azure, you know, it's weeks of work. It's weeks of work for this smart engineer that I have. So we've created a process where you could take your Azure subscription, plug it into our tool, and within 60 minutes or less, the entire Azure environment is built out for you. The networking, the security, the backup, the virtual desktops if you're using them, the Microsoft 365 environment, the security, everything you need to do to have users logging in within 60 minutes, we enable you to do. So it's fast and it's accurate. The second thing we do is we simplify the ongoing management of Microsoft Azure, right? So everything you need to do to manage your customers in Azure, we enable you to do. That's the 3-click management that we've talked about, right? So your help desk is probably getting many requests every day for, you know, hey, I need to add a new virtual machine. I have a new user that's starting. How do I do this? Everything is automated in 3 clicks or less. And then finally, we help you optimize the costs of Microsoft Azure. Now, this is probably one of the biggest hurdles that MSPs face when they start getting going with Azure. The MSP owner or the technician says, I can't make money in Microsoft Azure. How exactly do I do this? So we have a technology called auto-scaling that dynamically looks at your environment and will turn on and turn off, will expand and will shrink Azure resources to make it easier for you to save money. And when we talk about saving money, again, this is really one of the biggest hurdles MSPs face. They say Azure is too expensive. And what we find when we dig into that with MSPs, they say, well, Azure is too expensive, and the reason is because they're comparing the pay-as-you-go price for Azure to buying a server. But honestly, nobody uses the pay-as-you-go price. Nobody takes their credit card out of their pocket, types the numbers in, and buys Azure that way. Why? Because it's the most expensive way to buy Azure. Most MSPs don't want to do things the most expensive way. They want to save money. So when you use our auto-scaling technology, when you use our recommendations to buy reserved instances and leverage Azure Hybrid Benefit, 2 licensing programs from Microsoft, you are going to save a tremendous amount of money, and more than that, your costs are going to be predictable. You know, you can't quote a customer a per user per month cost and then each month have to go back to them and change it because you're running a consumption-based service like Azure, right? You need a predictable cost. And we have a tool called the Nerdio Cost Estimator that's usually the first thing MSPs look at when they look at Nerdio, where you could go in, you could actually plug in your customer environment that you want to move to the cloud, and it will tell you an accurate per user per month cost to move to the cloud, to move to Azure with your customer. And that is probably one of the greatest things that an MSP can have in their toolkit to be able to move to the cloud with Azure. From an education perspective, I thought I would throw this slide up here for a second because people tend to find it very interesting, and I think it helps explain why topics like auto-scaling and saving money are so important in the MSP space. If you bring a customer to Azure, what is the cost to you? You know, you have to go to Microsoft and you have to buy primarily two things. You have to buy compute and you have to buy storage. And there's other bits and bobs of things you have to buy. There's networking costs and there's egress and things like that. But primarily what you are renting from Microsoft, what you are using in Microsoft Azure is compute, which is about 70% of your cost, and storage, which is about 21% of the cost. So when you think about the topic of auto-scaling and automating the way that resources in Azure turn on and off, expand and shrink based on the user environment, what you're essentially doing is telling Azure to turn up and down compute and turn up and down storage. For example, people say, well, what does that mean? How do you optimize the cost of storage? Let me give you an example. For folks who are working in Azure, you know that each VM has an attached OS disk to it, right? So during the day, when that OS disk is running in the VM, you want the most performant OS disk you could have. So you would have like SSD storage, right? But at night, when nobody's using that VM, but you still have an attached OS disk to it, wouldn't it be great if dynamically it could swap from SSD, which is about $20 a month, to HDD or spinning media, which is about $1.50 a month. That's an example of the automation that we provide. That's an example of the auto-scaling that we provide that will look at the storage that you have and automatically swap it out when you don't need the highest performance storage. So if you can get control over your compute costs and your storage costs, you are going to save a lot of money when it comes to purchasing Azure from Microsoft, and more important, you're going to make a lot of money, and the offer that you make to your customers is going to be much, much better than the MSP down the road who's not using Nerdio. So MSPs ask us all the time, well, like, you know, how much money can I save when it comes to Microsoft Azure? What is the real amount of money that I could save? We typically see MSPs save about 75 to 80% of the cost of Azure relative to buying it on a pay-as-you-go model. 75%. So we're not talking about saving 5% or 10%. Most people, if they could save 5 or 10%, they feel, well, that's pretty good, right? I mean, anyone who's ever bought Azure, either directly from Microsoft or maybe through a cloud distributor like Pax8, you know that the margins that they're giving you on Azure are about, you know, it's about 11%, 12%. On Microsoft 365, I don't know, what is it now, 17%, 16%? We're talking about saving 75% on the cost of the most expensive piece that you're ever going to buy when it comes to Microsoft Azure. So that's game-changing. And as a result, the margins that we see MSPs making when they bring a customer to the cloud is at least 30%, often even higher. I was talking to an MSP just this morning in Lakeland. I just got back from driving up and back to Lakeland. They told me they're using Nerdio. They're easily making, I think he said, 52 points of margin on the cloud deals that we're making. I see Jim Barry here in the front. I'm sure he could attest to the fact that their margins are much higher when they bring a customer to the cloud using Nerdio. And that's super important, right? Because again, Azure by itself, without using a tool like Nerdio, is unpredictable. And that's the biggest hurdle that MSPs face when they don't use an automation platform like Nerdio. They say, well, how am I supposed to know what the cost of Azure is going to be. You know, I'd rather just stay on-prem, but we know that that's not the way the world is evolving, right? People who are buying on-prem servers, no one really wants to do it anymore. They just feel this inertia that's pulling them in that direction. Let me give you 2 examples that people ask about all the time, right? So they say, give me an example, Joseph, of like a use case with Nerdio or a use case without Nerdio. So the first one I'll give you is like an incredibly typical example. I'm sure like by show of hands here, probably everyone here has deployed a QuickBooks server in the past, right? That's like kind of a bread and butter thing that an MSP does, right? And typically if you go visit the company where the QuickBooks server is deployed, it's usually like the footrest for the receptionist at the front desk, right? It's like this little server that has a bunch of dust on it, and all the MSP wants to do is like get that server out of there. So they say, oh, can I put those 5 users that are using QuickBooks into the cloud? Of course you can. If you were to go to Microsoft without Nerdio and just say, hey, I want to put 5 users into the cloud using QuickBooks, it's going to be about $56 a user a month, which is not a terrible price per user per month for running QuickBooks. It's not an extraordinary price, but that same deployment using Nerdio and using our auto-scaling and using our recommendation engines would be about $31 a user a month, a pretty significant savings. Let's look at an example on the other end of the spectrum. MSPs come to us and they say, I've got this architecture firm, I've got this graphics design firm that they need to use high-end workstations. I need to go out and buy them these thousands of dollars of workstations because they need GPUs and they need huge processing power. Can Nerdio help with that? The answer is yes. Microsoft has specialized, they're called NV series virtual machines. Just like anything in Azure, you rent it in the cloud. They cost a little bit more money because they're higher performant machines. And the customer says, I want to put 111 CAD CAM users into the cloud. If you do that directly in Azure, it'll be about $75 a user a month. Again, not a terrible price for a GPU-intensive workload, but when you're using Nerdio, it's about $45 a user a month. So a pretty considerable savings. And I would just ask, by show of hands, who has deployed Azure Virtual Desktop in this room today? Okay, if you've deployed Azure Virtual Desktop and you're not using the auto-scaling that Nerdio provides, if you're not using Nerdio at all, I would love to have you come up to the booth and let us show you how, if nothing else, we could plug Nerdio into your existing AVD system in 10 minutes and we could save you money. It's a real thing. In addition to that, though, we could save you a tremendous amount of time. We did this very interesting survey last year where we went out to 1,000 MSPs who are using Nerdio, and we said, how long did it take you to do this task before you applied the automation of Nerdio? How long does it take you to do this task now? So I'll give you an example. If you're using AVD today, you know that image management is a big topic, right? Managing images takes a long time. Microsoft comes out with their Patch Tuesday. You need to take a look at their different patches. You have to create a new image. You have to propagate it to users. That's about 6 to 8 hours of tech time a month. When you use Nerdio, it's about 20 minutes. So there's a huge amount of savings. Obviously, much harder for us to calculate because we don't know what the labor costs are. But in almost every task that you do, as you've learned from working with companies like Roost, applying automation to that task will considerably save you time and, as a result, save you money. Again, we spend a lot of time on the education side of things, and we'll talk about that in a moment. All we want to do is spend time on stages like this or in classrooms educating you. We changed our whole focus this year from just focusing on Azure to also now including Intune. As we said, Intune is an incredibly powerful but somewhat complicated set of tools from Microsoft. Lots of MSPs have come to us and said, I'm using Intune, I'd like to use Intune. I'd like to think about maybe some of the tasks that I use my RMM for. I'd like to offload that to Intune since I get it as part of Microsoft 365. So we launched Intune support. We have multi-tenant management and cross-tenant management for it. We launched a very cool feature this year called Console Connect, where you can remote control into a user and be able to shadow them. We have full application management lifecycle, so that's a whole different topic I'd love to talk to you about at the booth, where you could automatically manage the distribution of your applications through Intune and much, much more. The way we price our product is per user per month. We have a, on the first of the month, we look back to see what you've actually consumed. We don't have long-term contracts. We don't lock you into anything. We want to win your business every day. If you're using Nerdio for Azure Virtual Desktop, our pricing starts at $12 a user a month. It goes down to $3 a user a month based on the total volume that you have across your MSP. If you just want to use Nerdio for Intune, we start at $3 an assigned Intune user down to 75 cents an assigned Intune user a month. So the pricing is exactly the same whether you buy directly from us on the Azure Marketplace or if you go through a cloud distributor like Pax8, for example. The only difference is if you go directly to us, you get supported by us. If not, you get supported by the distributor. So, you know, I talk a lot about the education that we do because I think it's something that we're incredibly proud of. The education that we do starts from me standing on stage like this, making an investment and being here with all of you, learning from you and telling you what we do, all the way to when you have an opportunity that you want to bring live. We have a free service called Go Live Engineering. We will assign an engineer to you to virtually look over your shoulder, to help you with the deployment, to world-class support. Our mean time to respond, I believe last month, we looked at the average over the past year is 7 minutes. Mean time to resolution, I think, was 28 minutes. So we really pride ourselves on support and much more. We have a free training called Nerdio Training Camp. Has anyone here been to a Nerdio training camp before? Okay, if not, you're missing something great. It's totally free. They take place literally all over the world. They're 2-day events, laptops open in a classroom-style setting like this. It's for you as an owner. It's for you as a technician. You come and you learn how to build a cloud practice in Azure. We pay for your hotel room. We pay for your flights. And we pay for your food and everything. We don't pay for your flights. We pay for your hotel and your food. And we would love to have you there. If you go to our website, to getnerdio.com, I think we have about 12 or 13 more of these in the US that are happening this year. We get about 50 to 75 MSPs taking part. And what I can guarantee you is if you sit through the 2-day session, you will know how to bring your customer to the cloud with Microsoft Azure. For those who've been to a training camp, we have something now called advanced training camps, where we go even deeper into Nerdio Manager as well. So if you're ready to build a successful cloud practice using Nerdio, we would love to chat with you. Morgan and I are at the booth next door. If you haven't seen us yet, all of our swag got lost by UPS. So sorry about that. Hopefully it'll come before you leave, and we'll give you some socks or pens or whatever it is that we shipped. But we'll be there with big smiles on. And we'd love to work with you. You know, I think I'll close by saying this. We work with MSPs who have no idea how to build a cloud practice in Azure, and we work with MSPs who've already taken many steps towards building a cloud practice using the Microsoft Cloud and everything in between. You may have an idea of a client that you're thinking of moving to the cloud, but you don't really know what it's going to cost or how to do it. We'd love to chat with you. You may be much more sophisticated and already have many clients in Azure Virtual Desktop, but you want to leverage the automation of Nerdio. We'd love to chat with you. So with that, again, a big thanks to Roost for having us at the event. It's great to be here. We'd love to chat with you more and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.